Dr. Darinka Mileusnic-Paulson. I'll let her say and spell it for you.
Raise your right hand. State your name.
Darinka Mileusnic-Paulson.
You solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Doctor, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
If you would say and spell your full name for us, for the record, please.
My first name is Darinka, spelled D-A-R-I-N-K-A, and my last name is Mileusnic-Paulson. Mileusnic is spelled M-I-L-E-U-S-N-I-C. Paulson is P-O-L-C-H-A-N.
Thank you. And where are you employed?
I'm the Chief Medical Examiner for Knox and Anderson counties and the Chief Medical Officer for the Regional Forensic Center in Knoxville, Tennessee, and also hold the position of Clinical Assistant Professor actually Associate Professor of Pathology at University of Tennessee Medical Center in Knoxville.
And how long have you held those positions?
I've been acting chief and chief since 2008. I've been in Knoxville since 2002.
All right. What, if you would, give us a little bit about your education that allows you to hold those positions?
So I graduated from medical school, University of Rijeka, R-I-J-E-K-A in Croatia. It's a 6-year medical program with the last year of internship because it's a different kind of system of schooling in Europe. And then I stayed at the same university teaching medical students and doing research for approximately 4 more years. And then relocated to Chicago area in 1991 to continue research and teach. And I joined the Department of Pharmacology and Neuroscience at Loyola University Medical Center in Chicago. And then during those research years, while I was completing my PhD, I also joined the Department of Pathology to get a training in neuropathology, anatomic pathology. That's where I spent about 3.5 years. And then after completion of those studies, decided actually to go into the field of forensic pathology. So finishing training in pathology at Loyola University at the same time as I was getting my PhD actually enabled me then to switch to Cook County Office of the Medical Examiner and then complete the last year of training in forensic pathology in Chicago area. And I stayed there with the Cook County Office of the Medical Examiner in the city of Chicago for about 4 years prior to relocating to Knoxville to continue the same line of work essentially. And during that time I became board certified in anatomic pathology and forensic pathology.
All right. Are you licensed to practice medicine here in Tennessee?
Yes.
All right. And are you certified in anatomic pathology and forensic pathology?
Yes, I am.
Do you maintain membership in any sort of medical related societies?
Yes, there are a number of societies such as American Academy of Forensic Sciences, the National Association of Medical Examiners, and then just the regular pathology groups that College of American Pathologists and American Society of Clinical Pathologists. The membership in the name, actually National Association of Medical Examiners, is important because actually that's the accrediting body for the forensic centers in the state of Tennessee, and then of course we are accredited by the name, by the National Association of Medical Examiners.
All right. Have you published any scholarly materials in the field of forensic pathology?
Yes, I published some papers and platform presentations and book chapters with the main interest in intersection of forensic pathology and anthropology, and then those mainly book chapters. And as far as the publications, I have a special interest in toxicology and child abuse.
All right. And have you done any presentations on asphyxia in children and strangulation?
That was actually one of the old presentations at the National Association of Medical Examiner meetings. It was a platform presentation.
All right. Now, you are currently employed as a forensic pathologist, correct?
Yes.
And are you board certified in the area of forensic pathology?
Yes, the anatomic pathology and forensic pathology is kind of dual certification.
All right. And so, what is it that you do as a forensic pathologist?
So in the state of Tennessee, actually, the forensic pathologists are medical examiners, and so because we don't have a coroner system, we have a medical examiner system. We are appointed to perform the duties of a medical legal death investigation on a county level. So essentially, that's what I do. I investigate with the help, of course, with the rest of the staff in the office. We investigate all the sudden deaths that happen, as I said, suddenly without medical attendance or due to violence. And our main obligation is to work not for any particular organization or the law enforcement. We work with the law enforcement to come up with an answer to what really happened and what the cause, manner, and mechanism of that in these situations where that happens suddenly, unexpectedly, without medical attendance or due to violence.
Okay. Have you previously been qualified as an expert in the field of forensic pathology?
Yes, in many counties in East Tennessee. Actually, I believe here in Sullivan County years ago.
All right, that was going to be my next question. And after having been qualified as an expert, have you gone on to give expert testimony in the field of forensic pathology?
Yes.
Judge, I would move to qualify her as an expert in the field of forensic pathology.
No objection, Judge.
Right, should be declared to be an expert in the field of forensic pathology.
Dr. Mileusnic, at the request of the District Attorney's Office here in Sullivan County, did you review an autopsy that had been performed by Dr. Matrina Schmidt, as well as other case materials involving the death of Evelyn Boswell?
Yes.
And if you would, tell us what materials you reviewed.
So I reviewed everything that was available when I was approached to originally look at the case, and I can list all the entries that I compiled in my report, if that's
Sure.
Acceptable. So what was available to me at the time of review and writing of my report is a birth certificate for Evelyn Boswell, Indian Path Medical Center birth records, Premier Pediatrics medical records, Mountain States Medical Group Urgent Care medical records, Bristol Regional Medical Center medical records, then autopsy report performed and signed by Dr. Schmidt, autopsy photographs, scene photographs, TBI forensic biology reports, several of them. They were dated from March 11, March 25th, April 22nd, and then TBI toxicology report dated March 19th, that's 2020. And then National NMS, which is the National Medical Toxicology Lab, both technology forensic case report, summary of facts by the Attorney General's Office, and the presentment State of Tennessee, Sullivan County Criminal Court case S72869.
All right. And these materials, are they typical of what you would normally review in preparing an autopsy?
Yes.
All right. And based upon your review of those materials, did you form an opinion as to the cause and manner of death of Evelyn Boswell?
Yes.
And what was that opinion?
So my opinion was that Evelyn died of asphyxial death, and that the manner of death was homicide.
All right. And again, you reviewed the autopsy that had been done by Dr. Schmidt. How, if anything, did your opinion differ from what she had concluded?
In essence, actually, our opinion did not really differ much, except that in my report, and that's the kind of luxury of writing a kind of expert review report versus the just regular autopsy report, is that I specify several different ways of asphyxial death or different mechanisms of it.
Okay. And when you say different mechanisms of asphyxia, what are you talking about? Can you explain that to the jury a little bit?
So asphyxia essentially means that the inability of a person to breathe or for the oxygen to be supplied to the cells in the body. And the different ways how that can occur is either by preventing the circulation to the brain or other organs and tissues in the body, or preventing the breathing, or putting a person in such a position that essentially compromises both circulation and breathing at the same time, with the end result of essentially depriving the tissues and organs of oxygen. And then in with that respect, actual asphyxial death in general are very complex deaths, and if there is any compromise in the integrity of the person, such as decomposition, then they have to be really described in such a manner, these mechanisms, that are understandable, because in the end, the asphyxial death is what we call diagnosis of exclusion, meaning when everything else is excluded, what we are left with essentially is that the findings in the body and the finding of the body within the scene that are going to come to essentially explain what really happened to an individual. What I'm essentially saying is that there's the asphyxial mechanism such as positional, mechanical, traumatic, or actually can be also the consequence of the positioning in the scene, and that information comes strictly from the scene investigation.
All right. And let's talk about each type of mechanism in regards to this particular case. What about the scene or the body would relate to positional asphyxiation?
So the forensic autopsy, just like any other autopsy, which is a major procedure, kind of cross-section and dissection procedure in the body, almost like a complex surgery, cannot be done in a vacuum. It has to be done in the context of the scene investigation. So that's why we have medical legal death investigation, and that's why medical examiner and representative goes to the scene in order to create a context in which this individual was found. And that's why I always say that the forensic autopsy cannot be performed in vacuum. It has to be performed in the context of the scene. And then that's how essentially we approach this particular case, whether it's Dr. Schmidt or me reviewing it, is that in the context of the case, we have an individual who is now wrapped in multiple layers, so we can talk about it in a minute, who is positioned upside down in a confined space and in a position that prevents actually breathing. And that's why I say the components of positional asphyxia, that's being upside down in a contorted kind of letter S position, mechanical asphyxia with the different objects essentially covering the individual's face or the body, and then traumatic asphyxia because of the positioning that is going to prevent the movement of diaphragm and breathing. And then, as I said, finding the individual in a trash can essentially creates a confined space, which is going to lead to confined space asphyxia. And that's why essentially, that's where I listed all these 4 different categories of or mechanisms of asphyxia.
All right. Could I see exhibits 19 through 38, please? Dr. Mileusnic, I'm going to show you what's been previously admitted as exhibit number 19. And if you would, kind of tell the jury what they're looking there and how what they're seeing relates to the mechanisms of asphyxia.
Can I show on the screen? Or,
Is there a pointer up there? It looks like a flashlight.
There's a pointer?
Yes, yes, if you don't care.
So what we are seeing is the trash can with the a child in a trash bag with the several layers on top of her, one of them being a blanket. That's essentially when, and that's how we all approach the scenes, is we go layer by layer, slight kind of uncovering the individual, whether it's adult or a child, in a similar fashion, because we don't want to lose any evidence, number one, and number two, we want to show all the kind of components of that asphyxia by approaching it in this layered fashion. And then we can see the body of the child in an unzipped kind of onesie in an upside down position with some of her body parts showing up. So essentially, when I was telling you originally positional asphyxia, she's upside down, and we humans cannot breathe like that. There is a confined space asphyxia because of the trash can and her head being all the way down. Mechanical asphyxia because several different layers covering her face, which we'll analyze in a minute. And then traumatic asphyxia just from her body being in like a kind of reverse S position, totally crumpled and compressed in such a way that she could not breathe. There is no expansion of the diaphragm or movement of the intercostal muscles between the ribs that allow us to breathe in a position like that.
Now I'm going to show you exhibit number, previously admitted as exhibit number 30.
So on this exhibit number 30, that's actually now several stages down the investigation path. So these always, as I said, as little manipulation as possible, and then go again layer by layer. We lost several layers here. The garbage can, the trash can, there was also, the trash bag. There was also a black bag on top of all of that. That was all removed. And now the child is in the blanket, and there is a foil, which is actually a very curious piece of evidence because it was so tightly applied to the child's face and upper body that looked like a wrapped, almost like a part of the kind of mechanism that prevents her from breathing, because that would be another kind of example of mechanical asphyxia, because an object is covering the face and preventing her from breathing. And the other thing that can be also seen is that the body is actually contorted, and usually that would happen, with kind of force applied, because we know now she's upside down, and the force applied for her body actually to kind of fit in the bottom of the garbage can, and that would be part of the traumatic asphyxia component.
Now I'm going to show you exhibit 31.
This exhibit 31 actually is kind of process of removal of the foil, because it was very voluminous and it was tightly applied to her face and the hair. One thing that actually happens with the decomposition of the body following a prolonged time interval after that is that a lot of our tissues start to actually break down and detach. So the hair starts detaching, the epidermis, first layer of skin, starts detaching. And so removing foil like this that is tightly applied actually takes a lot of time and a lot of effort to preserve the child and the facial features. And part of the problem was not just the tight application, of course, of the foil, but also all the decomposition fluid that kind of almost created a glue between the foil and the face of the child, and we can see her head starting to emerge in this particular area.
All right. Doctor, if you could talk a little bit about the decomposition. Is there anything as far as what you see there that would show you how long the child had been in that position, or anything based upon the amount of decomposition?
So the only thing that we can say really that it was advanced decomposition, and there were two types of decomposition that happened in this particular situation because of the position that Evelyn was in. The upper body, which was actually head first in the trash can, actually changed in form of so-called wet decomposition. That's why there is a lot of staining, and the decomposition fluid kind of staining the blanket and the foil, because all the fluids and everything that accumulated after that are now creating the environment for so-called wet decomposition. But then the rest of her body, which we'll see later, that were kind of up, the feet and legs, they underwent so-called dry decomposition, or actually more kind of mummification. So the only thing that we can say it's advanced, but how long really it took, it really just depends on many factors such as temperatures that were around that body, and of course on the layers applied on the body surface, because that will prevent some of the flies or some other predators from coming to the body and expediting, fastening the decomposition.
Okay. And did you notice that in this particular case? You mentioned the flies and the larvae.
Yeah, there was some pupae, but they did not really have like a direct access necessarily to the body, so there was not a lot of the maggot or activity at the time of her discovery.
Okay. Now I'm going to show you Exhibit 32.
So the exhibits 32
Yes.
is actually just another kind of painstakingly removal of all the layers. Again, the foil is being further detached, and now we can see her head and face, and then part of the upper body, her arm, while the legs are still covered.
Does this photo show anything in regards to the positioning of her head as it relates to asphyxia?
So one thing that was becoming evident as the body was being uncovered is that her face was flattened because it was pressed against the foil and the blanket and the side of the trash can. And then, of course, it was also kind of a little bit contorted because the face is pointing in this direction, and then her neck was kind of slightly contorted, and the head actually is almost at the level of her buttocks. Essentially, her feet, buttocks, and head, they're all kind of compressed almost at the same level now.
Now I'm going to show you Exhibit 34.
So the Exhibit 34 now shows it's kind of similar phase after the foil is removed. The blanket is covering the face, so the face is in this particular orientation. And again, the difference between all the fluids and wet decomposition staining the blanket versus just dry desiccation of the arm and then feet. So two kind of different processes happening at the same time, wet decomposition and dry decomposition or mummification.
Anything that you could tell in regards to, I know that the foil's been taken off in this particular photograph, but in regards to the positioning of the foil and the blanket as well, is there anything you could tell as far as whether that was haphazard or intentional?
Well, the child appeared to be wrapped, so that would show intentionality, because it's not that she was just put in a garbage and then a blanket on top of her. She was definitely wrapped in a blanket, and it took a while to actually remove all the layers and unwrap her. So so the way how she was found shows intentionality. As far as the changes on the blanket, one thing that happens with the wet decomposition and the fluids kind of creating, things do become kind of slippery in a way. So there was definitely some shift in the layers from the wet decomposition. Wasn't a lot of it, but there was some. And then we will see when the blanket is removed, actually, that her face was pressed against the garbage can because the pattern of the blanket actually remains on the face.
Next, I'm going to show you Exhibit 35.
So the Exhibit 35, now the layers of the blanket that are further removed. So the face is still covered. So we have the face, the shoulder, her buttocks, and her feet, as I said, almost at the same kind of compressed, reverse kind of letter S shape. And that's how she was presented after removal of the blanket. The blanket is still stuck to the face in this area, but that's going to be the next phase.
You mentioned this, she's in a reverse S kind of shape. Is that what you're talking about when you say positional asphyxiation?
Yes, so that would be a reverse S shape.
Next, I'm going to show you Exhibit 36.
So on the Exhibit 36, now just removal of the blanket from the rest of the head. And as I said, it had to be done really carefully because of the layers of the skin and hair detaching at this point with the wet decomposition.
All right. Can you tell anything in regards to the onesie that she's wearing in that particular picture?
I'm sorry?
The onesie, the clothing that she's wearing.
Yeah, the onesie actually was unzipped. And there was also a diaper on the body. And that was one of the questions, is that would that indicate what really kind of transpired? I mean, it's hard to tell, except that, of course, onesie was completely unzipped, which was unusual for a child who is just, let's say, hypothetically dying in her sleep.
Now showing you Exhibit 37.
So Exhibit 37 actually is now next phase. The blankets, the covering, the foil, everything is removed. The onesie is unopened. And then actually this is her kind of side in the front of the face. The facial feature actually can almost completely disappear because they're so flattened against the side of the trash can. And there was a lot of kind of pupae. There was no maggot activity, which would essentially help potentially with some timing of the postmortem interval, because from what I reviewed and from what Dr. Schmidt described, we didn't really see direct maggot activity, so they did not injure or damage the body to that extent yet.
And now showing you Exhibit 38.
And essentially what's happening now is that her body is kind of being unfolded. That's what needs to happen in order for the clothing items to be removed, and then for the photographs to be taken and an autopsy to be performed. Because with the autopsy, the head has to be open and the body has to be open in a Y-shaped manner with the Y-shaped incision. And that can only happen if the body is kind of unfolded now and for complete examination.
Dr. Mileusnic, did you, as part of your review of the records in this case, review the child's pediatric records?
Yes.
you see anything in there that would indicate to you that she would have died from something that was medically related, any medical conditions?
No, she was considered a healthy child, and all the milestones were reached in timely manner.
All right. And what about the possibility of her dying from some sort of rollover death?
So she was not an infant anymore, so she already be in a kind of toddler stage, and I've never seen overlaying on a child older than 8 months. Actually, 6 months is even pushing it, because it's just not easy to overlay a child who can already move, flip, and it's just not that easy, even for an adult, to overlay a child of that age. And I've never had a case like that. The only overlay of a 2-year-old that I had was actually a homicide.
All right. Dr. Mileusnic, are you aware whether the state of Tennessee Department of Health maintains statistics on rollover deaths as far as the age of children in Tennessee?
Yes.
And have you had an opportunity to review those statistics?
Yes.
How many children last year under the age of, or over the age of 12 months died of rollover deaths in Tennessee?
None.
How many children in the last 10 years over the age of 1 in the state of Tennessee died from rollover deaths?
Yeah, we all of those we call like unsafe sleeping environment. That's a none of the children who died of overlaying, rolling over, unsafe sleeping environment were older than a year.
Thank you very much. If you would answer any questions Mr. Scott has for you. Do you want any of these photos? No. Okay. Just thought I'd ask.
Good afternoon, Dr. Lewis. How are you?
Good afternoon.
My name is Gene Scott. I represent Ms. Boswell. First thing I want to ask you about is you did not conduct this autopsy.
No, I did not.
You had no physical contact with the body of this child. You didn't go to the scene. You simply reviewed what Dr. Schmidt had done. Is that correct?
I reviewed what she did and all the pertaining documentation.
And accordingly, had Dr. Schmidt have made some mistake, it's very possible that could be incorporated into your work as well.
That's a very complex question. I cannot answer yes or no. May I explain?
Sure.
So the point of having an autopsy report is to objectively describe the findings. And then the only subjective part of the autopsy report, the conclusion as to what happened, that's essentially Dr. Schmidt, in this case, conclusion as to what the child died of, cause and manner of death. So the objective findings, such as photograph, tissue sampling, should be part of the description of the case that should not be influenced by one's opinion. Now, my opinion is going to be based on those facts plus the scene investigation. So the question was, if Dr. Schmidt made a mistake, she made objective observations and put them in her report that are corroborated with photography and tissue sampling. So anyone reviewing the case can come up with his or her own conclusion as to cause and manner of death. So if she made some wrong observations that are mismatched with the photographs, autopsy photographs, scene photographs, then I should be able to notice that and comment on that, but I haven't noticed any mismatches. So essentially, her conclusion as to the cause and manner of that is that's her subjective thing. I followed my own kind of line of reasoning and conclusion reviewing based on not just her report, but the scene photographs and autopsy photographs, which are documented for posterity, and anyone can review them and come up with the objective kind of a conclusion as to cause and manner of that. So the short answer would be, if she made mistake with observations, I should be able to identify that in the photographs, and I didn't.
Were there photographs of the internal organs?
The photographs of the internal organs were not available. We frequently don't take those during autopsies, but we do sample organs to look under the microscope, and that was done.
Okay. Yeah, you described this was a diagnosis of exclusion. Can you explain what that means?
So by saying asphyxial deaths are frequently diagnosed exclusion means that we found an individual in a position that prevents breathing, but there is no mark on the body. And I've done thorough investigation. Unlike in this case, there are plenty of marks on the body. But what we say with the diagnostic exclusion, for example, is that if I have a drowning victim and I have absolutely nothing else on the autopsy, no heart attack, no evidence of seizure, no evidence of trauma, no evidence of drugs, well, the only now conclusion is that I excluded everything else, and therefore drowning as a part of the asphyxial death is the cause of that. So that's what I meant by diagnosis of exclusion.
Okay. In this case, as it relates to the medical reasons contained in the autopsy, and I'm not talking about where the child is found at the scene, but the medical conclusions, were you able to come up with a cause of death?
So there was no other reason for this child to be dead because there was no evidence of infection or or tumor or anything like that was identified at the time of the autopsy. And review of the medical records, which is always mandatory for forensic pathologists to review medical records, birth records, pediatric records, did not indicate that anything was wrong with the child, such as seizures or anything of that sort. So this child had no objective way or reason to be dead. And as I said, the tissues were sampled, and even with decomposition that sets in the organs, if there is some major infection in the body, it would have been identifiable, and it was not there.
Okay. What is sudden infant death syndrome?
Sudden infant death syndrome is actually an abandoned, antiquated term that was used to describe sudden death in a child that essentially had negative autopsy findings and negative scene investigation, which means that we don't use that term anymore. That was antiquated because it was never a syndrome. It always, syndrome means that there is a constellation of symptoms, findings, and signs that would kind of create this entity that one can actually have the reason for this person to be sick or dead, for that matter. So there was never a syndrome. It was never a constellation of findings. What it meant actually is that we didn't find anything at the autopsy, therefore it's kind of this SIDS, nebulous diagnosis. Now we actually know with the scene investigation and the advances in our field in forensic pathology that those situations with that is with no findings at the scene or in the autopsy are extremely, extremely rare. We call them sudden unexplained death in infancy, or SUDI. So that's a new term that we use. And I can tell you, with the proper investigation, the proper scene investigation, proper autopsy, and proper ancillary studies such as microbiology, histology, toxicology, the rate of those SUDI unexplained deaths is extremely, extremely low, actually almost non-existent.
So you're telling me that if another pathologist said this child could die of SIDS, they're just wrong?
Yeah, he's wrong, or she is wrong, because SIDS doesn't exist. SIDS never existed. So if that pathologist is using the term SIDS, that pathologist needs to go back to forensic school.
Probably not competent.
I'm sorry?
Probably not competent.
If he or she's using SIDS, that's not a competent pathologist. At this day and age, that's not a competent pathologist.
Okay. What did you call it? The new syndrome?
But it's actually not really a syndrome. It's a sudden unexplained death in infancy or unexpected death in infancy. Means that we exhausted all the investigative capacity and thoroughly done autopsy with sampling and ancillary studies, and we found absolutely nothing.
So how do you rule out that this child couldn't have died from a laryngeal spasm?
Because laryngeal spasm needs to have a reason for that to happen, and I've never had a case of a laryngeal spasm in a otherwise healthy child. And laryngeal spasm is basically something that somebody would give a diagnosis or the reason for a child to be dead when they're really trying to kind of come up with stuff and create some new category. That's pretty much it.
Gastroesophageal reflux, that can lead to a laryngeal spasm, can it not?
But that would not...
Yes or no, can it lead to that? And then explain.
That's actually not something that is described in the forensic pathology field. Laryngeal spasm would not necessarily kill a child.
But could it kill a child?
I've never seen it.
Could it?
I've never seen it.
In Dr. Schmidt's report, she states that the possibility that the decedent was alive when placed in the trash can cannot be excluded.
That's correct. That's what she stated.
Okay. Is that your opinion as well?
I believe she died in the trash can.
Okay. You have no proof to show she was alive when she went in the trash can.
I have all the proofs of her not being able to breathe once put in a trash can.
Doctor, you don't know if she was breathing when she went in the trash can, do you?
She would not be able to breathe no matter what. And as I said, because of the composition, of course, we were a little bit handicapped as far as being able to completely examine all her tissues and organs. But there was no reason for this child to be dead, other than being in the trash can, not being able to breathe.
You can't say conclusively she was alive in the trash can you?
She doesn't have a reason to be dead. And I never had an autopsy on a child older than 1 year old for no reason to be dead, except that she could not breathe in that particular position where she was placed.
Yes or no, can you say conclusively that she was alive when she was placed in that trash can?
She could not breathe in the trash can, so that's my main conclusion.
Are you refusing to answer my question, doctor?
No, I'm just saying that that child could not breathe in the trash can.
And I'm asking, if I may, yes or no, can you say conclusively she was alive when she was placed in the trash can?
No, she might have been dead because her foil was on the face before being placed in a trash can. She could have been dead because she was put in a plastic bag before she was placed in a trash can. Obviously, the foil, the bag, 2 bags, the blanket, tightly covering her face would prevent her from breathing. So all of those things had to happen before she was put in a trash can. So all I'm saying is that all those components, could have they actually brought her to brink of being dead before being put in the trash can? Sure. But the trash can definitely did not help.
Okay. You can't say conclusively she was alive while she was wrapped in that blanket or tinfoil, can you?
She would have definitely died with a tin foil and the bag and the blanket. And there was no reason to put all of those things and tightly apply to her face and her body unless she was alive.
You can't say conclusively that she was alive when she was wrapped, yes or no?
All I can say is that she cannot breathe. With a foil,
Judge, I would ask
with
you
a bag,
ask the witness to
and
answer
with
my
the blanket.
question, yes or no.
Doctor, you need to answer his questions. He's asking yes or no questions. You can explain afterwards if you want to, if you feel the need to, but you do have to answer his questions directly.
So I'm sorry, what was the question?
You can't say conclusively that that child was alive when it was wrapped in the blanket and when it was wrapped in tinfoil.
I have no reason for this child to be dead.
Yes or no, doctor?
Nobody can tell exactly the state of her body except that she cannot breathe with the foil and the bag. and
Judge,
the
I would
trash can
ask
and
the
blanket.
court to instruct the witness to answer the question yes or no and then explain.
I'm not really sure.
I'm not being mean to you. But he's asked you the question, the answer is either yes or no. And I'm instructing you to the best of your ability. Answer yes or no, and you'll have an opportunity to explain.
For a forensic pathologist, it's hard to answer that question, yes or no, but nobody can guarantee or say with certainty what really happened to this child prior to the foil being put on her face.
So you can't say whether she was alive or dead, can you?
She has no reason to be dead, other than
Judge,
that.
this witness is being evasive. May we approach?
All right. Let me see if I can boil this down to the lowest common denominator. He's going to ask you this question one more time. And I understand this case, this situation. But ma'am, I'm telling you, if the answer is not yes or no, you'll be facing contempt of court. Can I be more clear?
Yes, sir.
Ask your question.
Ma'am, yes or no, can you say conclusively that this child was alive or dead when it was placed in the blanket and the tinfoil?
The blanket, tin foil, the trash can, which one? Okay, the answer is no. She could have been murdered differently.
Thank you, doctor.
Redirect.
One second, Judge. Nothing further, Judge.
You should be excused.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. I looked at her and called you ma'am. I apologize.
Doctor, thank you for your testimony today. You're released from this opinion. and you're free.
Thank you.
Any other? Yeah, more witnesses.
I think we're a good stopping spot for today, Judge.
Any other? Ladies and gentlemen, I have to give you these admonitions, even though you've heard them. You're not